This is a tricky one. We're going to talk about how to handle requests for client references if you're a consultant, coach, or service provider. It can be frustrating when a prospect asks for client references because you don't want to have to bother your other clients. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 3 things you can do to help prevent your prospects from even asking for client references in the first place, as well as 2 options for how to handle it if they do ask for those references, including a very specific script that you can use in your email response back to them. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, it's really important to understand why your prospect is really asking for a client reference to begin with. There's really not a B2B decision maker out there who hasn't had a negative experience with an outside expert, service provider, or vendor that they thought was going to do a great job and turned out to be a real letdown. So when they're asking for a reference, it's because they're trying to protect themselves from making a bad decision. The thing is, client references are really not a very effective way to lower their risk of making a bad decision, because there's no expert out there, no consultant, coach, trainer, professional service provider who's ever going to share a client reference of someone who had had a negative experience with them, right? You're not going to say, oh, here's a client reference of someone who is really unhappy. So this doesn't really get to the answer that they're looking for anyway. So let's look specifically at the 3 ways to prevent decision makers from asking you for client references in the first place. Number 1, very early on in your relationship building with a potential new client, you want to share with them 2 to 3 simple case studies. They can be 1 slide each of other clients that you've worked with that had similar challenges or were a similar type of organization to that one. That's going to start to lay the groundwork with that decision maker that you're someone who has a lot of knowledge and expertise and you have a proven track record. Number 2, make sure you share some key metrics, some data points with decision makers that also show the level of expertise you have, as well as your experience in working with organizations long term. If you have worked with more than 50 organizations, say that. If more than 80% of your clients work with you more than once, that's a really high client retention rate. Make sure that's not just buried on your website somewhere. Make sure you're actually proactively sharing it with this new decision maker. And number 3, perhaps most importantly, anytime that you are discussing potentially working with an organization and really beginning to get into specifics about how you might work with their organization, you want to share with them your risk mitigation process. What is it that you do to help protect your clients from building the wrong ladder against the wrong wall, or projects running over time, or going over budget, or not getting the results they're looking for? What is it specifically that you're doing and helping them with to reduce their risk? If you share these things up front, you share your case studies, you share your metrics, you share your risk mitigation process early on, chances are much lower that they're even going to ask you for a client reference, because you've already in their mind answered the question, does this person know what they're doing? Is their firm really going to be able to help us? Is this going to be a success if we were to engage them and their company? So the more you do this up front, less chance they're going to ask you for that client reference. Now, what if they do ask you for that client reference? Let's talk about your 2 options. Option number 1 is you acquiesce and you say, you know what, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce this prospect to 1 or 2 of my clients and let them have that client reference. But what if you don't want to do that? What if you really feel uncomfortable about this and you don't want to bother your prior clients or even your existing clients? How do you answer in a way that's respectful? I'm going to give you an exact response right now. So here's a really powerful, simple response that you can send to a prospect who's asking you for client references. And of course, you can use this either over email or you can use it as a script if this request comes up in a meeting with that decision maker. And it sounds like this. We do not provide client references because we have found that it places an undue burden on our clients' time. We are highly protective of our clients' time, as we will be with your time should we move forward in working together. And of course, any references we offer will naturally come from our many happy repeat clients. Instead, we respectfully suggest the following metrics, case studies, and testimonials provide a much clearer and more complete picture of our 10-year plus proven track record. So you can see it's really short, it's succinct, it is respectful, and it really gets to the heart of why they're asking for a client reference anyway, because they want to make sure that if they work with you, it's not going to be a decision that they end up regretting. One very important point I do want to mention, and that is, should you decide that you want to provide a client reference to your new prospect, that's an okay thing to do. We just recommend that you maintain control of that process. And you maintain control by making an email introduction between the person who's giving you the reference and the person who's asking for that reference. So introduce them via email, and also let the person who's giving you the reference know what would be most helpful for them to focus on when they speak to your prospect, as well as the timeline as to when they need to have that conversation. If it's really important that they talk to your prospect before Friday, be sure to mention that in the email and ask before you wrap up the email that they let you know once they've had a chance to talk. That way you're not just sitting back in the dark hoping that this conversation has happened. So this gives you some very specific strategies on how to respond to a prospect when they're asking for client references. But of course, there's so much more for us to talk about. What I recommend you do next is go watch my video on how to sell to corporate clients. We go even deeper into the strategic come from that you want to have to really set yourself up for success from the get-go with these decision makers, and not let the toothpaste out of the tube and create more challenges for yourself that are going to get in the way of you getting your impact out into the marketplace. I have dropped the link for that video right below in the description. Go check that out now, and I'll see you over there.